In the heart of the ancient Nile, Egypt stood as a kingdom unlike any other, an empire whose lifeblood pulsed not only through the fertile lands, but through the divine. Every breath taken, every stone placed, every drop of water from the great river was steeped in a connection to gods who shaped not just the world, but the very souls of those who walked beneath their gaze. For the Egyptians, the veil between the mortal and the divine was thin. So thin that to understand life itself meant unraveling the mysteries of their gods. Through the centuries, the names of Ra, Isis, Osiris, and Horus echoed in sacred temples, whispered in shadowed rituals, and were etched into stone, their myths weaving into the very foundation of Egyptian civilization. These were more than mere stories. They were powerful forces that dictated the cycles of creation, death, and rebirth. But their influence didn't fade with the collapse of ancient Egypt. These gods, these forces, seeped into the fabric of time, shaping mystical traditions across the world. From the secret teachings of Hermeticism to the rituals of modern magic, their power lives on, hidden in plain sight, still shaping belief, still bending reality to their will. The gods of Egypt never truly left. They've been waiting, watching, woven into the spiritual movements of today. And the question remains, what truths do they hold, and what power still lingers in their ancient myths? Beneath the relentless sun of Egypt, gods and goddesses ruled over not just the heavens, but every facet of life and death. These weren't distant deities observing from afar. They were powerful, present forces intertwined with the mortal world. Ra, the radiant sun god, ruled supreme, pulling the sun across the sky on his great solar bark. Each dawn was a victory over chaos, as Ra battled the serpent Apep deep in the underworld, ensuring the light would return day after day. He wasn't just a sun god, he was the lifeblood of creation, the force that drove everything forward. Yet for all of Ra's power there were darker tales. Osiris, lord of the dead, ruled over the afterlife, embodying death's inevitability, but also the promise of resurrection. Betrayed and murdered by his brother Set, Osiris was dismembered, only to be pieced back together by his devoted wife, Isis. Osiris's story is one of cosmic betrayal and divine resurrection, setting the tone for the ancient Egyptians' belief in life beyond death. His green-skinned form was a symbol of fertility and rebirth, a beacon of hope to the dead who sought passage to his kingdom. Isis, the great enchantress, was the master of magic and healing. It was her sorcery that restored Osiris, and her cunning that protected their son, Horus, from Set's relentless fury. Isis was more than a goddess of motherhood. She was a force of divine protection, her powers reaching beyond the grave, worshipped in secret rites that echoed long after Egypt's fall. Then there was Horus, the falcon-headed god, born to avenge his father. His eye, the eye of Horus, became a symbol of protection, but it wasn't just an icon. It was a weapon, a remnant of his battles with Set, who sought to claim the throne of Egypt for himself. Horus's victory over Set secured not only his father's legacy, but the concept of divine kingship itself, binding the pharaohs of Egypt to the gods. Set, on the other hand, was the embodiment of chaos and violence, a god who thrived in the desert's harshness. He was not inherently evil, but a necessary counterbalance to the forces of order. In Egypt's volatile world, Set represented the unpredictability of life, the sudden sandstorm, the flood that destroys as much as it nourishes. He was chaos, but without him there could be no balance. Anubis, the jackal-headed guide of the dead, presided over the rites of mummification, ensuring that the dead were properly prepared for the afterlife. It was Anubis who weighed the hearts of the dead against the feather of Ma'at, goddess of truth and justice, determining whether a soul was worthy of eternal life or destined to be devoured by the monstrous Ammit. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, and magic, stood at the crossroads of science and the divine. As the scribe of the gods, he recorded the results of the weighing of the heart, but his influence went further. He was the god of the moon, medicine, and the inventor of hieroglyphs, the very symbols that conveyed the divine language of the gods. Hathor, the goddess of love, beauty, and music, was the embodiment of joy, often depicted as a cow or a woman with cow horns and a sun disk. Yet Hathor also had a darker side. Her wrathful form, Sekhmet, was a lioness who brought destruction when the gods were angered. She reminded the Egyptians that creation and destruction were two sides of the same divine coin. These gods were more than characters in stories. They were living forces, shaping the very essence of existence. The Egyptians did not merely worship these deities, they lived among them, their daily lives a reflection of the cosmic order these gods maintained. Whether in grand temples or small household shrines, these deities were called upon to intercede, to protect, and to guide. They were the intermediaries between humans and the cosmos, controlling the forces of nature and fate itself, reminding mortals of the delicate balance that sustained both the living and the dead. Through the gods, Egypt found meaning in the cycles of life and death. And while they commanded awe, their stories also spoke to deeper universal truths, forces of creation, destruction, justice, and chaos that have echoed through time, long after the temples crumbled. The gods of Egypt were immortal, not just in the myths of their ancient followers, but in the spiritual traditions and mysteries that persist to this day. In the heart of Egypt's belief system, one force reigned supreme above all others: Ma'at. She was not just a goddess, but the embodiment of the cosmic order, truth, balance, and justice. Every action in the kingdom, from the planting of crops to the decisions of the pharaoh, was guided by the principles of Ma'at. Without her, the universe would collapse into chaos, devoured by the darkness lurking at its edges. To the Egyptians, maintaining Ma'at was not just a moral imperative, it was a matter of survival. Pharaohs ruled as her living incarnations on earth, entrusted to uphold her laws. They weren't mere kings. They were divine conduits, responsible for preserving the fragile balance between order and chaos. Their power wasn't just political, it was cosmic. Each pharaoh seated upon the throne was a living god, a manifestation of Horus by day and Osiris by night, guiding the land's destiny. To defy the pharaoh was to defy the natural order itself. But what lay beyond the pharaoh's reign? Death in Egypt was not the end, it was a threshold, and guiding souls across this threshold were gods intimately tied to Ma'at's principles. None were more important in this journey than Osiris and Anubis. Osiris, once a living god and ruler of the underworld, presided over the afterlife, where the dead sought his judgment. His reign was one of resurrection and eternal life, but entry into his kingdom was not guaranteed. For the soul to pass into eternity, it had to first prove itself worthy. And it was Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the dead, who would lead them through the most critical test, the weighing of the heart. The dead arrived in the Hall of Two Truths, where their hearts, heavy with a lifetime of deeds, were weighed against the feather of Ma'at. Anubis, with his cool gaze, stood watch over the scales, ensuring no trickery could tip the balance. It was here that the truth was laid bare, as the feather symbolized the purity of Ma'at, light, truthful, and free of corruption. If the heart was heavy, weighed down by lies or misdeeds, the consequences were swift. The monster Ammit, a terrifying amalgamation of lion, crocodile, and hippo, awaited those whose hearts betrayed them. To fail this test was to be devoured, erased from existence, denied even the possibility of an afterlife. Yet if the scales balanced, if the heart was light and free, the soul would pass into Osiris's domain, joining him in the field of reeds, an eternal paradise where the righteous lived in peace and plenty. Osiris, who himself had died and been reborn, offered the promise of renewal to all who had lived in accordance with Ma'at. This promise was not just for the elite, but for anyone whose soul had remained true. For the pharaohs, this journey carried additional weight. As rulers, they were the embodiment of divine order, charged with upholding Ma'at in life, and in death they were expected to maintain that balance as they transformed from Horus to Osiris. Their passage through the afterlife was a return to their celestial origins, where they would reign alongside the gods, continuing to watch over the living. The entire nation's fate rested on their ability to successfully navigate this cosmic transition. Temples were built, priests performed intricate rituals, and the pharaoh's body was meticulously prepared, all to ensure that the ruler would succeed in this journey and not disrupt the divine balance of the universe. Ma'at's laws govern not only the lives of mortals, but the destiny of kings and gods alike. In the intricate balance between life and death, creation and destruction, the Egyptian cosmos was delicately maintained, every soul playing its part in a greater, universal order. The journey to the afterlife wasn't just a matter of belief. It was an obligation, a final test to prove one's place in the eternal cycle. This profound relationship between the living, the dead, and the gods made every moment sacred. Every breath taken was an invocation to the divine order. To live in Egypt was to be bound by Ma'at's truth, knowing that when death came, the scales of judgment awaited. In the beginning there was nothing but the endless dark waters of Nun, the primordial chaos. No light, no sound, just the boundless void, infinite and silent. And from this abyss something stirred. From the formless darkness rose Atum, the creator god, self-born and alone. With nothing but his own divine will, he gave shape to the universe. Atum stood on the primordial mound, a patch of land rising out of the chaotic waters, and through sheer force of intent, he brought forth the first gods, Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. These two children represented the first breath of life and the fluid essence that sustains it. Shu, the fresh breeze that fills the lungs, and Tefnut, the dew on the earth that nourishes all growing things. But creation was far from complete. From the union of Shu and Tefnut came the earth and sky themselves, Geb, the solid ground beneath our feet, and Nut, the arching sky that stretches across the heavens. But Geb and Nut were inseparable, locked in an eternal embrace, and the world was suffocating beneath their closeness. So Shu, in his role as the separating force, forced them apart, raising Nut high above Geb and creating the space in which life could flourish. The earth below and the sky above, separated forever by the god of air, allowed the world to come into being. The story of Egypt's creation is one of cosmic separation and divine intervention, but it's not unique in its essence. Across cultures, the theme of a primordial chaos, from which the first gods emerge and divide the world into sky and earth, repeats itself with striking similarity. In Mesopotamia, Tiamat, the great serpent of chaos, was split by the god Marduk, forming the heavens and the earth. In the Greek tradition, Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky, emerge from chaos and, like Nut and Geb, are separated to allow life to thrive. Yet, in the Egyptian myth, creation is not the result of violence or conflict. It is an act of divine will and balance. Atum's creation was orderly, precise, each god representing a critical force of nature. It was a cosmic blueprint, setting the stage for everything to come. The world was not born from war, but from a delicate dance of elements. The air, the moisture, the earth and the sky, each given its place in the universe. But the act of creation did not stop with Shu, Tefnut, Geb and Nut. From these primordial deities came more gods, each embodying essential aspects of existence. Nut, the sky goddess, became the mother of Osiris, Isis, Set and Nephthys, and thus the divine family of Egyptian mythology took shape. Each of these gods would play a critical role in the shaping of Egypt's cosmic order, their stories woven into the very fabric of creation itself. The Egyptian creation myth, like the waters of Nun, is deep and vast. It speaks of life emerging from the void, of balance and separation, of forces in perfect harmony. But even in this perfect order, there was always the potential for chaos, lurking just beyond the edge of the universe. The act of creation was not the end. It was merely the beginning of a long, eternal battle to preserve the fragile balance Atum had set in motion. And so, from the breath of Shu and the moisture of Tefnut, the earth of Geb and the sky of Nut, the universe was born, fragile and precious, resting on the shoulders of divine forces. These gods were not distant or abstract. They were as real as the air we breathe, as the ground we walk on. Their story is the story of the world itself, a tale of creation that echoes across cultures, but remains uniquely, undeniably Egyptian. It was the golden age of Egypt, and Osiris ruled as its king, beloved, wise, and just. His reign was a time of prosperity where life thrived under his benevolent gaze. Osiris wasn't just a king, he was a god of life, the one who taught humankind how to farm, how to live in harmony with the land, and how to ensure that death was not the end. But peace has a way of breeding envy, and lurking in the shadows was his brother, Set, god of chaos and desert storms, whose heart simmered with resentment. Set, restless and power-hungry, could not abide the success of Osiris. The desert god, jealous of Osiris's reign and influence, plotted his brother's downfall with a malevolent brilliance. And so the plan was set in motion, one steeped in betrayal. Set invited Osiris to a grand feast, presenting a beautiful chest, perfectly crafted and adorned. He offered it as a gift, but only to the one who could fit inside it perfectly. When Osiris, trusting and unsuspecting, lay down inside, Set's trap was sprung. The lid slammed shut, and with the help of his followers, Set sealed the chest and cast it into the Nile, leaving his brother to a watery grave. But death was not enough for Set. In his lust for control, he sought to obliterate Osiris from existence. He tracked down the chest, tore open the lid, and dismembered his brother, scattering his pieces across the land, ensuring that Osiris could never be resurrected. Yet, in the dark corners of Egypt, where magic was whispered like breath on the wind, there was Isis, the devoted wife of Osiris. She was not just a queen, but a goddess of immense power, skilled in the ancient arts of healing and magic. Grief-stricken but determined, Isis, with the help of her sister Nephthys and the falcon-headed god Horus, set out on an impossible task: to find and reassemble Osiris's body. Piece by piece they gathered him, invoking ancient magic to breathe life back into his shattered form. Through her power, Osiris was reborn, but his fate was forever changed. No longer could he walk among the living. Instead, he became the ruler of the dead, the eternal king of the underworld, presiding over the souls of those who passed into the afterlife. His resurrection was not just a victory over death. It was a promise that death could be conquered, that life was cyclical, and that the end was merely a beginning. Osiris, now green-skinned, became a symbol of rebirth, of the eternal cycle of life, death, and renewal that was at the heart of Egyptian belief. But the story did not end there. Osiris and Isis had a son, Horus, born from the magical union after Osiris's death. Horus the Avenger was destined to reclaim the throne that Set had stolen. In a series of brutal battles that shook the divine realm, Horus and Set clashed for the future of Egypt. Each battle was fierce, the gods themselves taking sides in the cosmic war between order and chaos. Finally, after many trials, Horus emerged victorious, claiming his rightful place as the ruler of Egypt. His triumph was not just a personal victory, but a cosmic one. Horus's ascent to the throne restored balance to the world, with him embodying the living pharaoh, the god-king who would uphold the sacred order of Ma'at. The Osiris myth is more than a tale of gods. It is a reflection of the eternal struggle between life and death, chaos and order, justice and betrayal. In this myth, kingship is more than mere power. It is divine responsibility. Osiris represents the eternal king, the guarantor of life after death, while Horus symbolizes the living king, the protector of Ma'at, who brings order to the land. Set, though defeated, was never completely vanquished. He remains, lurking at the edges of the cosmos, a reminder that chaos is always present, waiting for a moment of weakness to strike again. The myth of Osiris, Isis, and Horus tells of more than just family and revenge. It is the foundation upon which Egyptian kingship and belief in the afterlife are built. Life and death are two sides of the same coin, and resurrection, while a victory, always comes with a price. By day, Ra soared across the sky, his golden light warming the earth and ensuring the world flourished under his gaze. But when the sun set, Ra's journey was far from over. Each night, the sun god descended into the Duat, the treacherous underworld where light did not shine, and an ancient primal darkness waited to devour him. This nightly voyage was not a peaceful descent into rest. It was a battle against the forces of chaos, embodied in the form of a monstrous serpent known as Apep. Apep was no mere creature. He was the living embodiment of chaos, vast, coiled and malevolent, lurking in the depths of the underworld, waiting for the moment when Ra's strength waned, waiting for darkness to swallow the light. In Egyptian mythology, the existence of Apep was a constant threat. While Ra's journey through the sky during the day was glorious, it was in the underworld where his true test began. Each night, Ra boarded his solar bark, joined by a retinue of gods and protectors, among them Seth, the god of storms and chaos, paradoxically tasked with defending the sun god from the very forces he embodied. As Ra's boat drifted through the dark rivers of the Duat, the world above held its breath. In the pitch black, the serpent Apep rose from the shadows, his vast writhing body seeking to strangle the light, to send the universe into eternal night. The battles were ferocious. Ra wielded his divine power while the gods at his side fought to keep Apep at bay. There were nights when it seemed the darkness might win, when Apep's jaws nearly closed around the solar bark. But Ra was relentless, and with each passing hour he would overcome the serpent, banishing it back into the abyss, though never for good. Apep could not be destroyed, only driven away, waiting to strike again. Each victory Ra claimed was temporary, fleeting, for Apep would always return the following night, the cycle beginning anew. This eternal struggle was more than just a celestial drama. It was a cosmic metaphor, one that Egyptians understood in their very bones. Ra's journey was a reminder that order, the very fabric of existence, was fragile. The world lived on the edge of chaos, and every day was a triumph over the darkness that threatened to consume it. The sun's rise in the morning wasn't merely the start of a new day. It was proof that Ra had defeated chaos once more, that light had survived the night, and that order had been restored for another cycle. In the broader context of Egyptian mythology, Ra's battle against Apep wasn't an isolated event. It echoed the eternal conflict between order and chaos, between Ma'at and Isfet. Ra, the god of the sun and creation, was the ultimate champion of Ma'at, the force that kept the universe in balance. Apep, on the other hand, was the manifestation of Isfet, chaos, disorder, the destruction of all things. This duality shaped the very fabric of the Egyptian worldview. Life itself was a constant battle to maintain Ma'at, to preserve the delicate balance that held chaos at bay. Every night, as Ra fought through the underworld, the people of Egypt were reminded that their gods, too, were locked in this eternal struggle. It was not just the fate of Ra on the line, it was the fate of the universe. A single misstep, one moment of weakness, and Apep would succeed. The sun would not rise, the world would plunge into eternal darkness, and chaos would reign. Yet each dawn, when Ra emerged victorious, hope was renewed. The light had returned, the world was safe, at least for another day. In ancient Egypt, the gods didn't simply exist in the heavens or the underworld. Their presence was woven into the very world around the Egyptians, embodied in the animals that roamed the earth, the sky, and the rivers. Each animal, each symbol, carried with it the essence of the divine. The falcon, sharp-eyed and swift, soared through the skies as a manifestation of Horus, the god of kingship and vengeance. With every beat of its wings, it carried the power of protection, its keen gaze piercing through deception, always watching over the throne of Egypt. The falcon's form was no accident. It represented the soaring, untouchable might of Horus himself, unyielding and ever vigilant. The ibis, a creature of quiet dignity, waded through the shallows of the Nile with deliberate grace. It was the earthly avatar of Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing, whose knowledge flowed like the river's currents. To the Egyptians, the ibis was more than a bird. It was a living symbol of divine intellect, a bridge between the mortal world and the sacred truths written in the stars. It was Thoth who gave humanity the gift of hieroglyphs, not just a way to communicate, but a way to connect with the very gods themselves. And then there was the jackal, whose presence struck fear and reverence in equal measure. With its sly, predatory movements, it mirrored the dual nature of Anubis, the guardian of the dead and the keeper of funerary rites. The jackal prowled the edges of the desert, where the boundary between life and death blurred. Anubis, with his jackal-headed form, was the god who ensured that those passing into the afterlife were properly protected, his connection to the jackal cementing his role as the guardian of those who walked the shadowed path to eternity. Each animal wasn't just chosen at random. Their characteristics mirrored the divine qualities of the gods themselves. The Egyptians saw the divine in the natural world, recognizing that gods revealed their power through the creatures that shared their realm. But this connection to the gods didn't stop with animals. Every element of their mythology was steeped in symbolism, a secret language understood only by those who could see beyond the surface. The language of Egypt was itself sacred, not merely a tool for daily communication, but a powerful script that held the weight of divine truth. The hieroglyphs, with their intricate and deliberate shapes, were more than written words. They were magical symbols, each one imbued with spiritual energy. Hieroglyphs had the power to create, to destroy, and to summon the presence of the gods themselves. Every stroke, every carving on temple walls or tombs was designed not just to tell a story, but to invoke the forces of the cosmos. To write the name of a god in hieroglyphs was to call that god into being, to summon their power from the unseen world. The Egyptians understood that words carried weight, but it was their symbols that carried souls. Among the most powerful of these was the Ankh, the key of life. Its simple form, a looped cross, held within it the mystery of immortality. To hold the Ankh was to hold the promise of eternal life, a gift from the gods to the pharaohs, who would live on in the afterlife, ruling alongside the divine. The Ankh was not just an object, it was a declaration, a guarantee that life did not end with death, but continued beyond the grave, everlasting and unbroken. Then there was the Eye of Horus, a symbol of protection and healing. The eye, damaged during Horus's brutal battle with Set, was restored through the magic of Thoth. It became a powerful emblem of wholeness, a symbol that bound together sight, power, and divine protection. Egyptians wore it, carved it into their tombs, and carried it into battle, believing that the Eye of Horus would watch over them, ensuring their safety in both this world and the next. It was more than a symbol. It was a living force of protection, an invocation of the gods' gaze. These sacred objects, like the animals and the hieroglyphs, were not mere ornaments or writing. They were manifestations of the divine itself, tangible connections between the human and the godly. They served as reminders that in Egypt, the world was alive with power, every symbol a doorway to something greater, something eternal. Whether through the flight of a falcon, the whisper of hieroglyphs on stone, or the presence of an Ankh in the hand of a pharaoh, the Egyptians knew that their world was infused with the presence of the gods, watching, guiding, and protecting. Every aspect of their culture, every sacred object, reminded them that life and death, protection and danger were always intertwined, and that the symbols they carried had the power to tip the balance, to open the gates of the afterlife, or to summon the gods themselves. In ancient Egypt, the gods were not distant, untouchable beings. They could be called upon, their power channeled, manipulated, and brought into the world through Heka, magic. But magic in Egypt was not a dark art practiced in secret shadows. It was a divine force, the very foundation of existence. It was believed that the gods themselves used Heka to create the universe, and so by wielding magic, humans could tap into the raw energy that shaped all things. Magic was everywhere, infused into the daily lives of the Egyptians. It wasn't a superstition or an afterthought. It was an essential part of survival, woven into everything from childbirth to the rituals of the dead. To the Egyptians, Heka was the force that maintained balance in the universe, the invisible current running through the world, keeping chaos at bay and ensuring the cosmos remained in perfect order. In the sacred temples, the priests were the masters of this ancient power, trained to invoke the gods and perform rituals that ensured harmony between the divine and the mortal world. They weren't merely caretakers of the temples, they were intermediaries, standing at the threshold between humanity and the gods, using magic to maintain the delicate balance of Ma'at. Within the towering stone walls of the temples, magic took many forms. Incantations were spoken over offerings, invoking the gods to bless the people with fertile lands, protection and health. Statues of gods animated with divine energy through rituals were clothed and fed daily by the priests, their magic ensuring that the deities remained satisfied and connected to the mortal world. Without these rituals, the gods' power could fade, and the land would descend into chaos. Every gesture, every word spoken within the temple was steeped in magical significance, reinforcing the invisible bond between the human and the divine. One of the most powerful uses of magic, however, was in the realm of death. The Egyptians believed that the journey into the afterlife was fraught with peril. To navigate the dangers of the underworld and reach Osiris's realm, one needed more than bravery. They needed protection, and magic was their greatest weapon. This is where the Book of the Dead came into play, a collection of spells designed to guide the deceased through the trials that awaited them beyond the grave. The Book of the Dead, known to the Egyptians as the Book of Coming Forth by Day, was not a single text, but a series of scrolls filled with powerful incantations and rituals. Each spell served a purpose, whether it was to help the soul pass the weighing of the heart, avoid the clutches of demons, or summon protective deities. The magic inscribed within these sacred texts ensured that the soul would not lose its way in the darkness of the Duat. Some of the most feared entities in the underworld, like the serpentine Apep or the devouring demon Amit, could be banished with the proper spell. Magic was the key to survival in the afterlife. If spoken correctly, the soul would be granted safe passage, blessed with the favour of Osiris and eternal life in the field of reeds. If the spells failed, the soul would be lost forever, devoured or trapped in the endless cycle of death and chaos. But magic wasn't reserved solely for priests in the afterlife. Ordinary Egyptians, too, believed in the protective power of magic in their daily lives. Amulets were worn to ward off evil spirits, curses and disease. Spells for fertility, protection and healing were recited by families passed down through generations. Magic in ancient Egypt was as much a practical tool as it was a spiritual one, an invisible shield between the people and the lurking dangers of the world around them. In Egypt, magic was not something that belonged only to the divine. It was a gift from the gods, meant to be used by mortals to navigate the forces of life and death. Whether whispered in the halls of temples or scrawled onto the walls of tombs, Heka was always present, shaping the fates of gods and humans alike. To wield it was to touch the very essence of creation, to step beyond the boundaries of the mortal world and into the realm of the eternal. Though the gods of Egypt were deeply rooted in the ancient sands of the Nile, their influence did not end with the fall of the pharaohs. Their wisdom, particularly that of Thoth, the god of wisdom, writing and magic, echoed far beyond Egypt's borders. Thoth, with his ibis head and moonlit gaze, was more than a scribe to the gods. He was the architect of knowledge, the keeper of sacred mysteries, and the inventor of language itself. But over time, Thoth's divine identity would merge with another figure, one who would shape the spiritual and philosophical landscape of the West: Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes Trismegistus, meaning thrice great Hermes, was a fusion of Thoth and the Greek god Hermes, a figure who was both a messenger of the gods and a guide of souls. As these two deities merged, so did their wisdom. Hermes Trismegistus became the embodiment of both divine intellect and cosmic order, and his teachings, collected in what became known as the Hermetic corpus, would serve as the foundation for many mystical traditions, including alchemy, astrology, and theurgy. The Hermetic corpus was a series of texts that claimed to hold the secret knowledge of the universe, attributed to Hermes Trismegistus himself. While these texts emerged during the Greco-Roman period, they were steeped in the wisdom of ancient Egypt. They explored concepts of divine unity, the nature of the cosmos, and the soul's journey through the planes of existence. Central to Hermetic thought was the idea that the material world was but a reflection of higher spiritual realms, a mirror of the divine mind. These ideas were directly influenced by the Egyptian worldview, where the material and the spiritual were intertwined, inseparable from one another. At the heart of Hermetic philosophy was the belief in as above, so below, the idea that the microcosm reflects the macrocosm. This principle mirrored the Egyptian understanding that the human soul was a reflection of the gods themselves, that the actions of mortals could influence the cosmic order. In Egypt, Thoth had always been the one who maintained balance, who recorded the deeds of the gods and men, and who ensured that the divine law of Ma'at remained intact. In Hermeticism, Hermes Trismegistus played a similar role, teaching that humanity had the potential to ascend, to understand and even manipulate the forces that governed the universe. Hermeticism's alchemical texts, deeply symbolic and often cryptic, were not just about turning base metals into gold. They were about the transformation of the soul, the elevation of the spirit to its divine state. And at the heart of this process was Thoth's wisdom. Alchemy, as practiced in medieval Europe, was built upon the philosophical foundations laid by the Hermetic corpus, which in turn drew heavily from Egyptian teachings. The Egyptians had long revered the balance between creation and destruction, life and death, and alchemists sought to mirror this balance through their work, believing that the secrets of immortality and enlightenment could be unlocked through understanding the natural world. The influence of Hermeticism reached its height during the Renaissance, a period when the thirst for knowledge and the revival of ancient wisdom ignited Europe. Scholars and mystics looked to the Hermetic texts for answers, drawn by their promises of hidden truths and divine secrets. Figures like Marsilio Ficino and Giovanni Pico della Mirandola translated and studied the Hermetic corpus, weaving its ideas into the intellectual and spiritual fabric of the time. The Renaissance saw a resurgence of interest in ancient Egypt, as scholars recognized the profound impact that Egyptian thought had on the origins of Western mysticism. But Hermeticism was not confined to scholarly circles. It seeped into the practices of magicians and alchemists, who saw in Hermes Trismegistus a guide to unlocking the mysteries of the universe. The Hermetic belief that knowledge was power, that understanding the divine order of the cosmos could grant control over the material world, was a direct echo of the Egyptian belief in Heka, the magical force that permeated all things. Just as the priests of ancient Egypt had invoked the power of Thoth in their rituals, Renaissance magicians sought the guidance of Hermes in their quest for divine knowledge. Thoth, through his transformation into Hermes Trismegistus, continued to influence not only the spiritual practices of Hermeticists, but also the broader development of Western occultism. His legacy, one that began in the temples of ancient Egypt, became the foundation for many of the mystical and magical traditions that flourished in the centuries that followed. The god who once wrote the fates of men in hieroglyphs now whispered his wisdom through alchemical texts and Hermetic rituals, guiding seekers on their journey toward enlightenment. In the secret libraries of alchemists and the shadowed halls of Renaissance scholars, Thoth's ancient wisdom lived on, hidden in plain sight, waiting for those with the insight to uncover it. And so the teachings of ancient Egypt through the Hermetic texts continued to shape the evolution of spirituality and magic long after the last pharaoh had fallen. The words of Thoth, transmuted into the voice of Hermes Trismegistus, still held the power to transform the soul, to unlock the mysteries of the cosmos, and to lead humanity ever closer to the divine. The echoes of ancient Egypt ripple through the modern world, especially within the shadowy corners of ceremonial magic and occult practices. Isis, Osiris, and Horus, gods whose myths once shaped the spiritual fabric of Egypt, are still very much alive in the magical systems practiced today. They are invoked not just as distant deities, but as powerful forces that ceremonial magicians draw upon, believing that the ancient gods hold the keys to unlocking hidden realms of power and transformation. One of the most prominent figures to weave Egyptian symbolism into modern magic was Aleister Crowley, the self-proclaimed great beast and founder of Thelema, a religious and magical system built upon esoteric knowledge. Crowley's fascination with Egypt began with a powerful personal experience in 1904, when he and his wife, Rose, visited the Cairo Museum. There, Rose claimed to hear the voice of Horus, guiding them toward an ancient stele, the stele of Ankh-Khonsu, which would become a central symbol in Crowley's magical system. Crowley later claimed that Horus, through this encounter, dictated to him the Book of the Law, the foundational text of Thelema. In Thelema, Horus represents the new Aeon, the Aeon of Horus, ushering in a period of self-empowerment and spiritual awakening. This vision of Horus is not the avenging god of Egypt, but a force of individual freedom and will. Magicians who follow Crowley's teachings invoke Horus to channel strength and the divine power to break free from societal constraints, seeking the transformative energy that Horus embodied in Egyptian myth. Isis too finds a place in modern magical practices, often invoked for her deep connection to magic and resurrection. In ancient Egypt, Isis's powers were formidable. She was the one who resurrected Osiris and protected her son, Horus, using magic that surpassed even the gods. Her mysteries were so profound that she was worshipped across the ancient Mediterranean, her cult surviving long after Egypt's decline. Today, modern witches and ceremonial magicians call upon Isis in rituals of healing, protection, and the manifestation of the divine feminine. Isis is not merely a mother figure, she is the embodiment of magic itself, a force that can bend reality and call forth new life from death. The rituals invoking Isis are often steeped in the imagery of resurrection and rebirth, drawing from her mythic role in resurrecting Osiris. Magicians channel her power to restore balance and life, believing that, like Osiris, what is dead can live again under her watchful eye. Her protective magic, once used to shield Horus from Set's wrath, is now invoked to guard practitioners from both spiritual and physical harm. Osiris, the lord of the underworld and symbol of resurrection, is invoked for his deep association with the cycles of life and death. In ceremonial magic, Osiris is often called upon in rites that focus on transformation, renewal, and immortality. Practitioners believe that Osiris can grant insight into the mysteries of death and the afterlife, offering a path to spiritual rebirth. His role as the judge of the dead mirrors the work of magicians who seek to balance their own spiritual scales, weighing their hearts against the feather of Ma'at in the pursuit of higher enlightenment. Crowley's rituals, especially those found in Thelema, were not isolated in their use of Egyptian gods. In Golden Dawn, a magical order that heavily influenced Crowley, Egyptian deities played a significant role in ceremonial rituals. The Golden Dawn taught that by invoking these ancient gods, practitioners could access the divine wisdom encoded in Egypt's rituals and cosmology. Thoth, Horus, and Anubis frequently appeared in their ceremonial rites, where they represented stages of spiritual evolution and guided initiates through their personal journeys toward enlightenment. In these modern practices, Egyptian deities are not mere symbols. They are forces that can be invoked, channeled, and used to transform the practitioner's reality. The rituals often blend ancient invocations with modern magical systems, with ceremonial magicians chanting the names of these gods, drawing sacred symbols, and using magical tools inscribed with hieroglyphs to invoke the power of ancient Egypt. The Eye of Horus, for instance, is not simply a symbol of protection, but an active magical sigil used to ward off evil and bring clarity to the magician. Similarly, the Ankh, once a representation of eternal life in Egyptian culture, is used in rituals to channel the life-giving energy of the gods, symbolizing immortality and the preservation of the soul. In these rites, modern magicians seek to tap into the deep reservoir of power that the Egyptian gods represent, believing that these forces, thousands of years old, still have the ability to influence the present and future. Isis, Osiris, and Horus are invoked not as distant relics of an ancient religion, but as living forces of magic and transformation, guiding practitioners through the mysteries of life, death, and the divine. Egypt's gods, once carved into the walls of temples and whispered in sacred tombs, now find themselves reborn in the hearts of modern practitioners, continuing to shape the occult and mystical traditions that still thrive today. In the modern world, where ancient echoes still resonate through the rituals and beliefs of contemporary spirituality, neo-pagans have embraced the gods of Egypt, weaving their divine stories into new practices. Egyptian deities, once worshipped in temples beneath the blazing desert sun, are invoked in the quiet corners of modern pagan rituals, their power undiminished, their wisdom sought for guidance in an increasingly complex world. For many neo-pagans, gods like Isis and Hathor have found new life, venerated not only for their ancient roles, but as symbols of empowerment and transformation. Isis, once the mother goddess who brought her husband Osiris back from death's grip, has evolved into a figure of immense power within feminist spirituality. Modern practitioners turn to her not just for her role in healing and resurrection, but for her unyielding strength, her independence, and her mastery over life and death. In a world where patriarchal structures have often dominated spiritual narratives, Isis represents the ultimate reclaiming of power. Her myth is not simply one of grief and mourning, but of triumph. Her magic so potent that it could restore Osiris to life and protect her son Horus from the chaos of Set. For many women in neo-pagan and feminist spiritual circles, Isis stands as a reminder that feminine power is not passive but active, transformative and divine. Isis's role as a mother is also reinterpreted in contemporary spirituality. Rather than the nurturing, submissive archetype often associated with maternal figures, Isis embodies a fierce protector, a mother who defies death itself to safeguard her family. Neo-pagans who invoke her in rituals often do so with the belief that she can grant not only protection but the wisdom to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Hathor, the goddess of love, joy, and music, also plays a vital role in modern neo-pagan practice. Her softer aspects, which celebrate beauty, creativity, and fertility, are embraced by those who seek to connect with life's pleasures and passions. Hathor, with her ties to both the earthly and the divine, serves as a reminder that spirituality is not just about the soul, but the body, that joy, sensuality, and the celebration of life are divine acts in themselves. But Hathor's worship doesn't end with love and music. Neo-pagans recognize her duality, acknowledging her fierce counterpart Sekhmet, the lioness goddess of war and destruction. This duality, the balance between creation and destruction, is a common thread in neo-pagan belief, where the divine feminine is seen not as one-dimensional, but multifaceted. Hathor and Sekhmet represent both sides of the coin, love and rage, creation and destruction, and through this, they empower those who invoke them to embrace the full range of their own emotions and experiences. In feminist spiritual practices, goddesses like Isis and Hathor serve as embodiments of the divine feminine, challenging the traditionally male-dominated interpretations of power and divinity. They offer a model of empowerment that is deeply rooted in ancient stories, but which speaks profoundly to contemporary struggles for equality and autonomy. Beyond the goddess figures, Other Egyptian deities also find their place in neo-pagan practice. Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing, is often invoked in rituals seeking clarity, knowledge, and guidance. His association with the moon and his role as a mediator between gods and humans make him a bridge between the mundane and the divine, essential for those who seek to balance their spiritual lives with the material world. These gods, though ancient, remain alive in the hearts and minds of modern practitioners. Whether through the strength of Isis, the joy of Hathor, or the wisdom of Thoth, neo-pagans find in the Egyptian pantheon a spiritual system that honors both the divine and the human, the mystical and the everyday. These deities offer not only a connection to the past, but a path to personal empowerment in the present, a reminder that the gods, like the forces they represent, are eternal, and their stories continue to inspire new generations. Beneath the surface of Egypt's ancient myths lies something primal, something that transcends time and culture, the deep well of universal themes and archetypes that touch every human soul. Carl Jung, the great psychological theorist, believed that these myths were not just stories, but manifestations of the collective unconscious, expressions of shared human experience etched into the psyche of every individual. And nowhere is this more evident than in the timeless tale of Osiris and Horus, a story of betrayal, death, and the enduring bond between father and son. In Jungian terms, Osiris embodies the father archetype, the wise and just ruler who protects and nurtures, but whose fall is inevitable. He represents the passing of authority, the cycle of death that all fathers must face, and the handing over of power to the next generation. Osiris's death at the hands of his jealous brother Set is more than a mere tragedy. It is a necessary part of the eternal cycle. In the father archetype, there is always a sense of vulnerability, an eventual decline that makes way for the rise of the hero. Horus, the avenging son, steps into the role of the hero archetype, tasked with reclaiming what was lost and restoring balance to the cosmos. His struggle against Set is not just the story of a young god seeking vengeance for his father's death. It is the archetypal battle between good and evil, light and darkness, order and chaos. Horus must overcome incredible obstacles, much like the heroes of myths from every corner of the globe. His journey is universal, reflecting the archetypal quest for identity, power, and the restoration of justice. Jung recognized these dynamics not only in the myths of ancient Egypt, but in the myths and spiritual traditions of cultures worldwide. The relationship between Osiris and Horus, the father and the hero, is mirrored in countless stories. From Oedipus and Laius in Greek mythology to Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader in modern pop culture. The themes of death, resurrection, and the reclamation of lost power resonate deeply across human history because they reflect the essential stages of life and development, both within the individual psyche and within societies. The hero's journey, made famous by mythologist Joseph Campbell, is another key component of these universal themes. Horus's struggle against Set, culminating in his eventual victory and ascension to the throne, mirrors Campbell's outline of the hero's path, the call to adventure, the confrontation with evil, and the return to power. This cycle is not only seen in the myths of Egypt, but is a recurring theme in spiritual and religious traditions worldwide. In Christianity, Jesus Christ follows a similar journey, facing death, descending into the underworld, and rising again, victorious to offer salvation. In Buddhism, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, faces his own trials under the Bodhi tree before achieving enlightenment and sharing his wisdom with the world. But these archetypes do more than inform religious stories. They are embedded in the way humans understand their own lives. The hero archetype speaks to the universal desire for transformation, for overcoming adversity, and for achieving greatness. Each individual, in their own way, walks the path of Horus, battling their own versions of Set, seeking to reclaim a lost sense of power or identity. Likewise, the father archetype represents both the guidance we seek and the inevitable loss we must face as we grow. These ancient myths offer a reflection of the human condition, one that modern psychology continues to explore. Jung's theory of the collective unconscious posits that these archetypes are not learned but inherent, passed down through generations as part of the shared psychological inheritance of humanity. The story of Osiris and Horus, therefore, isn't just an Egyptian myth. It's a piece of the human soul, a narrative that exists in all of us waiting to be understood. The resonance of these archetypes extends beyond personal psychology into the very structure of society. Kingship itself, in many cultures, is modelled on the Osiris-Horus dynamic. The old king, wise but vulnerable, must eventually give way to the younger, stronger hero. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh was seen as the living Horus, a direct manifestation of the divine hero. But when the pharaoh died, he became Osiris, lord of the underworld, while his successor took up the mantle of Horus, continuing the eternal cycle. These archetypes, these stories of fathers, sons, and heroic struggles, continue to shape the way humanity understands itself. They are as much a part of the modern world as they were of ancient Egypt, influencing everything from religious doctrine to psychological development. They are the hidden forces behind the myths we tell ourselves, the universal truths that connect us all, from the time of the pharaohs to the present day. And in these archetypes we find not only the essence of Egyptian mythology, but the very blueprint of human experience. The ancient Egyptians saw the universe not as a fixed, immutable reality, but as a living, breathing cycle of creation, destruction, and rebirth, forces in constant motion shaping every aspect of existence. These were not abstract ideas. They were embodied in the stories of their gods. Ra's nightly journey through the underworld, the dismemberment and resurrection of Osiris, and the endless battles between Horus and Set were not just tales of divine drama, but reflections of the cosmos itself, a dance between order and chaos, birth and death. In today's world, as humanity reaches for deeper truths in science and metaphysics, those ancient myths take on a new resonance. Their symbolism speaks to the very forces that modern physics and metaphysics seek to understand: creation, destruction, and the energy that binds all things. The Egyptians' vision of the cosmos aligns in surprising ways with the mysteries explored by quantum mechanics, the invisible web of energy, the unpredictable nature of matter, and the interconnectedness of all things. At the heart of Egyptian cosmology was the idea that the universe was born out of none, the primordial waters of chaos where no form or structure existed. Out of this abyss, creation emerged, brought forth by the power of the gods. This is reflected in quantum mechanics, where the universe is understood to have emerged from a vacuum, a sea of fluctuating energy fields from which matter spontaneously appeared. Just as Atum rose from the void to give shape to the world, so too did the universe burst into existence from nothing, a singularity expanding into the infinite complexities we now observe. Creation, in both Egyptian myth and quantum theory, is not a one-time event. It is a continuous process. The Egyptians believed that each day, Ra was reborn with the rising sun, constantly fighting the forces of chaos to preserve the order of the world. In quantum mechanics, particles are in a constant state of fluctuation, popping in and out of existence, governed by forces that are both creative and destructive. At the subatomic level, the universe is always in motion, just as Ra's eternal battle with Apep represents the never-ending struggle between light and dark, existence and oblivion. Egyptian myths also echo in the concept of rebirth, the cycle of life, death, and renewal. Osiris, dismembered by Set, is resurrected by Isis and becomes the ruler of the underworld, a symbol of life after death. In metaphysical terms, this myth reflects the transformation of energy, a fundamental principle of the universe. Energy, like Osiris, cannot be destroyed. It can only change form. In death, there is rebirth, a concept that mirrors both ancient spiritual beliefs and modern physics' law of conservation of energy. And then there is the idea of divine balance, the eternal tension between creation and destruction, order and chaos. The Egyptians viewed the world as a delicate balance maintained by Ma'at, the goddess of truth and order. Without Ma'at, chaos would overwhelm the cosmos, plunging it back into the primordial waters of none. This principle finds a surprising parallel in the second law of thermodynamics, where the universe is constantly moving toward entropy, toward chaos. Yet within this march toward disorder, there are pockets of order, places where energy gathers and life flourishes. Just as Horus maintains balance against Set, so too do modern scientists see the universe as a constant push and pull between order and entropy. Egypt's gods, seen through the lens of modern metaphysics, can be interpreted as manifestations of these cosmic forces. Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing, can be viewed as the embodiment of knowledge and structure, the same principles that govern the laws of physics. Horus, the avenging sun, represents the force of justice, the drive to restore balance, much like the self-correcting systems observed in nature. Set, with his chaotic energy, is the unpredictability of the universe, the force that disrupts but also creates room for new growth. In quantum mechanics, the idea of wave-particle duality, the fact that particles can exist as both waves and discrete points, depending on how they are observed, calls to mind the Egyptian belief in Heka, the magical force that flows through all things, connecting the seen and unseen. Just as the observer influences the state of a particle, so too did the Egyptians believe that through magic one could influence the very fabric of reality, bending it to the will of the divine. The Egyptians understood that the cosmos was more than physical matter. It was infused with a spiritual energy that shaped both the gods' and human lives. This idea is not far removed from modern metaphysical explorations into consciousness, where scientists and philosophers ponder the role of human awareness in shaping reality. The Egyptian gods were not distant deities. They were forces that could be invoked, experienced, and even influenced by the mortal world, much like modern theories of the interconnectedness between mind, matter, and the quantum field. In a world where science and spirituality increasingly intersect, the ancient myths of Egypt seem less like relics of a forgotten time, and more like ancient wisdom that speaks to universal truths. Whether through the lens of quantum physics or metaphysics, the myths of creation, destruction, and rebirth continue to hold profound meaning, reminding us that the universe is alive with forces far greater than we can comprehend, forces the Egyptians understood intimately and which we are only beginning to grasp. From the radiant power of Ra, endlessly battling the forces of chaos, to the mysteries of Osiris, who transcended death to rule the afterlife, the gods of ancient Egypt have left an indelible mark on the spiritual fabric of humanity. Isis, Horus, Thoth, and the other divine forces continue to inspire, their myths echoing through time, influencing not just ancient practices but the religions and magical traditions that followed. These deities are far more than distant relics. They represent eternal forces, creation, destruction, and rebirth, woven into the very structure of the cosmos. But their legacy doesn't stop in the ancient world. Egyptian mythology speaks to universal truths, connecting the physical and the divine, the known and the unknowable. Today, their influence persists in both spiritual exploration and modern metaphysical thought, inviting those who seek to understand the mysteries of existence to look back to the wisdom of the Nile, where gods once walked among mortals, and where, even now, their stories continue to guide us through the realms of the seen and the unseen.